Sunday, November 19, 2023. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we take a deep dive into the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minutenews. Joining us today is a Portland, Oregon-based writer, activist, and organizer. He is the co-founder and executive director of Demcast USA, a non-profit dedicated to fighting right-wing propaganda online. Nick Knudsen, welcome to the Weekend Show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, fighting information online, that's kind of, we're going to have a lot to talk about in this hour. I kind of have a feeling, because you could argue that really has been at the, going back to like Cambridge Analytica in 2016. I mean, you could argue that is a huge part of where we find ourselves now. But I just thought I'd start by, I was looking at the Demcast website, and I was thinking about some of the stuff that you were posting there, and you were talking about Donald Trump's lies. It said Trump not only lied over 30,000 times, he also made false promises to the American people that he had no intention of fulfilling. Whereas President Biden tells us the truth about what he will do, then he delivers. His accomplishments for the American people are many. His administration defeated the COVID-19 pandemic, saved untold lives, passed $1 trillion infrastructure bill, and Biden's many other legislative accomplishments are making America safer and more prosperous. Trump promised, but Biden delivered. This is really the difference, isn't it? That Donald Trump is all talk. And we could use factories as an example, right? Auto workers and auto factories. I think, 4, 5, 6 factories closed down during his administration. Do you think that in terms of the information warfare, do you think that people have a sense that Donald Trump might be saying all this stuff and nothing really happens? Because, time has passed now. The evidence is pretty clear.
Well, I love the fact that you brought up the factories. Even right from the inaugural address, you might remember a line from the inaugural where he said that factories were scattered like tombstones across the landscape, right? And made all kinds of promises throughout his tenure as president about bringing manufacturing back and rebuilding the infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. And like you said, Biden actually did it. Like they passed the Chips and Science Act and are bringing manufacturing back, and with a focus on clean energy and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law. Which is rebuilding our roads and bridges across the United States. And I think there's a time delay on a lot of those projects. So maybe a lot of Americans haven't come to appreciate the impact of those quite yet. But yes, do people understand that Donald Trump is all talk and no, largely, apparently, right? I mean, I'm online a lot, that's part of the gig. And I see so much of the disinformation, so much of the, probably Russian bots and trolls and people and Iranian bots and trolls, who are online. They're not saying Trump is the best and Biden is the worst. They're saying both sides are terrible.
Yeah.
That both sides are the same.
Yeah.
And so that's what I hear from so many people. And it's an extremely effective strategy for sort of duping Americans into thinking, it doesn't matter. They're all full of it. It's a really big problem, and given the right-wing media infrastructure, it's a really hard dynamic to overcome.
So we're in a situation now where it's almost like no matter what Biden does, no matter how much he delivers, it kind of, in terms of the voter and the electorate, and certainly in that period leading up to the election of November 2024, it might not be enough. I mean, this is why they're going to have to put his name on every bridge that is built, so that people even in Republican states know that came out of a Joe Biden initiative. I mean, is it as simple as that? Is it like the branding of Joe Biden's accomplishments needs to be greater in order to get that message across?
I think branding is important. It's really that Republicans have no shame about being extremely loud,
Yeah.
and Democrats shouldn't either. So yes, branding. I think also calling Republicans out when everybody voted against the bipartisan infrastructure law,
Yes.
right? Not literally everybody, because it was a bipartisan infrastructure law,
Yeah,
but it was a very, very small minority of Republicans.
And yet those Congress people who voted against it are taking the credit.
They're taking the credit.
Yeah.
They're taking the credit. And so, that's where it gets really local, and where it's really important to have people monitoring all of that and calling out those Congress people, those senators who are trying to take credit for those projects, and socializing that. Media is not going to cover this.
Yeah.
Like, media has no interest in roads and bridges. That's been clear for a long time. They care about the horse race, and that's just about it.
I mean, this is my point about the branding of the bridge as a very simple analogy, isn't it? That it's not enough just to build the bridge, Nick, right? It's like you have to build it, and then you have to put a banner over it that said Joe Biden and the infrastructure bill built this bridge. And then you have to promote that by, taking ads out and billboards. It's like, to get the message home requires so much extra spend and extra effort.
Yes.
And it's sad to me because, America is actually it's not as bad as the Republicans would have you think. And when Trump, talked about going to DC, and, when he was going for his first, he was being booked, wasn't he? He was being photographed, and he was like, it's crumbling and there's graffiti everywhere. And it was like, he was just lying.
Yeah.
And it's not as bad as they would have you believe. I mean, they talk about Los Angeles and California all the time, and the homeless, and it's like, for those of us who live here, it's really not what they are talking about. They've probably never even been here. So much of the rhetoric is just anecdotal, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh man, I live in Portland, Oregon, and a city that's been tremendously vilified by the right. It's a very peaceful, nice community. I mean, yeah, we've got our problems, all big cities do, but it's not like Antifa's, putting graffiti on your house when you're asleep, or trying to truly like take over downtown or anything like that. It's just that's the extreme effectiveness of the right-wing media and ecosystem. They latch onto a talking point, and one of their strong talking points is the defective Democrat-run cities that have homeless people on every corner and are in squalor, it is something that we've got to push back against, because it's not going away unless we do.
Just explain to us how Demcast works and how you go about that, because that really is your mission, isn't it? It's like reprogramming the information so that people can get the truth and share the truth.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for asking. So Demcast, like you said, we're a 501c4 nonprofit, really dedicated to fighting right-wing disinformation online, lifting up pro-democracy messaging. Some people hear Demcast and they say, oh, it's Democrat cast. It's actually democracy was sort of the founding theory behind our effort here, but it just so happens that there's one party that's kind of pro-democracy right now. And so we end up boosting a lot of Democrats because they're the party of pro-democracy. So what we do is we empower and embolden regular people with social media accounts. Doesn't matter which platform, doesn't matter who your audience is. You could be on Facebook in South Carolina and have, a largely sort of right-wing MAGA audience of friends on there, or you could be in the Bay Area and be on Twitter and TikTok and all your followers are liberals. We want to meet you where you are, help you deploy messaging that either persuades on where persuasion is needed, or mobilizes where mobilization is needed, and informs everybody about the truth and the importance of the pro-democracy movement fighting against rising authoritarianism in the MAGA GOP.
there are two things I want to ask you about this. Firstly is that Demcast, obviously, people are going to think Democrat. And actually, that has now become a problem in the vernacular, hasn't it? That people think that democracy is exclusive to Democrats because of the verbiage, and consequently, it's in my view, it's one of the reasons that Republicans are pushing away from democracy is because the word sounds like Democrat. Is there any truth to that?
I mean, English is a funny language.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're overtly devaluing democracy. Like they don't really talk about boosting democracy or saving democracy. That's something that we talk about. For them, it's more of a punchline. That they use against us. So, I think that's definitely a dynamic that's happening.
Because weirdly, Donald Trump is actually talking about democracy. He is one of the people that is. I agree, the Republican lawmakers are not, but Trump is saying, they're taking away our democracy, and I'm going to bring it back. Never say we're going to bring it. I'm going to bring it back. It's always the solitary, the dictator, the authoritarian.
Right.
But the thing is, he was the guy that broke it. And this is what's so interesting, isn't it? That people forget that prior to not just January 6th, but prior to even 2016, Donald Trump was saying, well, if I don't win, then it must be rigged. And that noise got louder and louder and louder, and certainly was powerful in 2020 and ever since. But he is the one that has been eroding the democracy that we hold dear in the US. It was actually never in peril before he showed up.
No, I mean, you could make an argument that, starting with sort of Newt Gingrich, the underpinnings of the movement,
that was almost a different generation, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean that was baby democracy killing.
Baby democracy, right? This is like a modern. This is like a Cold War, like a modern warfare now.
It is. Yep.
So if the guy who broke democracy by saying that everything was rigged and then brought about the insurrection, the coup, the riot, and everything that went with it, if he's the guy that's now offering to fix it, what do you think the likelihood is? Because this is the burning question that everybody asks me. They're like, well, is he going to win? Is he going to win? And I'm like, I don't actually know. And it's crazy that with all the polling that we have and all of the the research and the social media and the communication, it's all we talk about is this guy. And yet none of us have any prediction on this subject.
It's so
Why
tough.
do you think that is?
Well, some of the other factors here are just the circumstances of this specific election that make it super unpredictable. You have RFK Jr. in there. You've got Jill Stein saying she's going to run again. You got, the no labels, maybe a Joe Manchin ticket. And that just throws all kinds of ambiguity and uncertainty into an election process that is always, just because of where we are as a country, it's always going to come down to, a handful of voters in a handful of states, swinging one way or the other. And, because we've got our hardcore blue states, we've got our hardcore red states, and then we've got, a half dozen to a dozen states where things can change. And, so it just gets really hard to predict. It's like, how's the economy doing? What's happening in Israel and Gaza? What's happening with these third party candidates? So it's just hard to predict because of how divided America is.
Not to mention that Donald Trump has 4 indictments and 91 charges. And so there's
a wild card in there.
Right. Yeah. There is that thought that, well, maybe he'll end up in a federal prison or, something. And I suppose we've never had to contend with that before.
Well, and there were some recent polls that were like super troubling on the Biden side. But some of the underlying numbers in there were promising on that front. There was like a 6-point swing, I think, for some Republicans who sort of changed their tune if Trump was a convicted felon. Said, "Oh, we probably shouldn't have a felon who's president," and sort of change the way that they might vote in those polls. So I think that is maybe the biggest factor in what could really swing the 2024. It could end up being a landslide for Biden if these trials are super public, if Trump fails in his ability to convince everybody that it's just a witch hunt, if the facts come out and people say, ugh, that's definitely a possibility.
But Trump hasn't won anything since 2016, right? And I think that we sometimes forget that. He's a loser, right?
He's a loser.
But he makes the most noise. Yeah. And he's always in the newspapers. It's an old-fashioned phrase, wasn't it? He's always in the newspapers. I haven't seen a newspaper for a while. But right. I get this. I get the sense that with the reason that those of us who study this find it difficult to predict is because so much of our work is taken up dealing with him. And actually, when it comes to voters, so much of this noise is not really permeating through to them. And middle America is probably not hearing it in the same way that we might be on the coasts.
They are not, for sure. It's as the 24 election picks up, it'll start seeping out more, I think. And I think that could be a little bit, some of the embedded anti-Biden, pro-Trump numbers in some of these polls, I think are partly because he has been kind of out of the spotlight.
Yeah.
And he's just sort of reemerging from his hole now. And once he starts coming back into the light, I think people will be reminded about why he's such a disgusting human being. But I think it's incumbent upon us all. And this is why, Demcast does, why we do what we do at Demcast, for all of us to use whatever reach we have, whether that's just talking to people in our community or using our social media network to spread truth. But just to stay on message, because the legacy media or the mainstream media or whatever you want to call it, they're just going to follow him around with their tongues hanging out because he gets them ratings. And that's just that at least we've learned. And so we have to find some workarounds for that.
But he also is very repetitive, and there isn't really much new coming out of the Trump camp. And, aside from what's going on legally for him, in terms of the offering for 2024 and beyond, nothing is really changing. He's just talking about making America white again, going back to that, old mantra, bringing back the Muslim ban, shutting the border, all of the stuff that those of us on the right side of democracy recognize as intrinsically fascist.
Yep.
That is very much on the menu, isn't it? And unfortunately, people like that. I mean, there are Americans who are like, yeah, shut the border, ban the Muslims. This is America. And it's not something I can wrap my head around as a European. And hopefully most people who care for humanity wouldn't either.
I hope so. I mean, it's, his agenda is what it's been, but in a second term, it's just going to be on steroids because at least in his first term, it's not like he had an all-star team working for him or like the best people in government, but there were some people in there who I think, at least were not telling him everything that he wanted to hear. Round two is going to be Trump and his little Trumpkins running around his yes men. It's going to be gloves off. It's going to be Muslim bans. It's going to be criminalizing immigrants. It's going to be continuing the erosion of rights for civil rights, LGBTQ, women's rights, and they're not going to be once they get into office, they're not going to be bashful about it. And Americans really need to understand that before they vote in 2024.
Okay, we have to take a quick pause for our sponsor, but I'll come back with you and we'll talk more with Nick Knudsen here on The Weekend Show. Did you know that your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. Using silver-infused fabrics originally inspired by NASA, Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, so you get a better sleep every night. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice, if not nicer, than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria can clog your pores, causing outbreaks and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code WEEKEND at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend and use the code WEEKEND to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. That's trymiracle.com/weekend to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. If someone would have told me that there are science-backed ingredients that could help me feel 15 years younger in a matter of months, I wouldn't have believed it. Then I tried Qualia Senolytic. As we age, everyone accumulates senescent cells in their bodies. Senescent cells cause symptoms of aging, such as aches and pains, slow workout recoveries, sluggish mental and physical energy associated with that middle-age feeling. Also known as zombie cells, they are old and worn out and not serving a useful function for our health anymore, but they are taking up space and nutrients from our healthy cells. Much like pruning the yellowing off dead leaves of a plant, Qualia Senolytic removes those worn-out senescent cells to allow for the rest of them to thrive in the body. It takes just 2 days a month. The formula is non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, and the ingredients are meant to complement one another, factoring in the combined effect of all ingredients together. It has a 100-day money-back guarantee, and since taking Qualia Senolytic, I have higher energy levels, I feel 15 years younger, and feel more productive and enthusiastic in life, not to mention less aches and pains. Resist aging at the cellular level. Try Qualia Senolytic. Go to neurohacker.com/weekend for up to $100 off and use code WEEKEND at checkout for an additional 15% off. That's neurohacker.com/weekend for an extra 15% off your purchase. Thanks to Neurohacker for sponsoring today's video. We're back with Nick Knudsen from the Demcast, which is, I recommend you go take a look because it's these kind of grassroots organizations that we often don't really hear about, but there is so much work going on the ground to mobilize people, to make people realize, how important the next election is. Would you say that 2024 is a more important election than 2020 was?
They just keep getting more important, I feel like, as time goes on. The longer because the Republican Party broadly is more MAGA now than it was then.
Yes.
And certainly in 2020, it was more MAGA than it was in 2016. And so like whether Trump's involved or not, like obviously he's the most dangerous human at the moment in terms of like threat to democracy. But the broadening connection of the sort of MAGA philosophy to the Republican Party is something that's going to keep being a problem into the future, regardless of whether Trump's on the ticket or not.
But the other candidates are all saying the same stuff. I mean, Nikki Haley is an extremist as far as I can tell.
Completely.
Ron DeSantis is Trump in cowboy boots. I mean, all of these characters. Vivek Ramaswamy is a disaster. I mean, it's like, where did this guy come from? And yet they seem to be parroting Trump because they see that it works, and they haven't thought too deeply about it. But they're like, well, I'll just say what he's saying. They
know that they have to if they want to win.
Right.
You can't win the Republican nomination for president without winning the MAGA base. Those people are in the driver's seat, and all those people know it. So that's why you hear them parroting what he says.
But it's pretty naive, isn't it? Because the MAGA base is minimal, really, isn't it? It's what, 30% of the Republican vote potentially. Even if it's 50%, it's still not enough. That kind of hardcore, extreme, angry people who oddly don't benefit from any of Donald Trump's policies. I mean, all of that lot would be much better off voting for the Democrats. But, the anger is more visceral than their desire to actually think long term. Why? I mean, that happens in many countries, doesn't it? The poor or the dispossessed invariably vote for the right-wing candidate. It's almost like a protest vote, isn't it? Can you explain that? I mean, why do you think that even after all the history of the last 7 or 8 years, that people still haven't worked out that authoritarian character really cares nothing for them?
Well, I mean, it's the politics of grievance. It's what he has deftly, I hate giving him any credit, but sort of laid out for a vast swath of America, instead of focusing on their economic best interests or, making sure that we have money to fund public education so that kids can learn things. That Republicans don't talk about any of that stuff. They just talk about they're coming to take your guns. They're killing babies. And so it's really just they hate Christians. So it's a culture war. And that's why it's so ingrained, is because people feel like, because it's been told to them again and again and again and again and again that Democrats are coming to take your way of life away from you, by importing immigrants and having them take your jobs and, all these things. And, none of it's true, but because of the way the media ecosystem works, there's no real sort of handy way for people to sort of be, dissuaded from thinking that way.
Isn't it sad that we're in a country that is just so riddled with misinformation, that is so at odds with reality, that the potential to lose the democratic process and one's freedoms are all at stake over a mistake, right? Yeah. The whole thing is just, it's a huge mistake.
Yep.
And yet the country could fall because messaging is so poor, whether it be because the Democrats don't make the right noises or don't respond appropriately, or whether it because Trump and his people are shouting too loud.
Yeah, it is. It's just terrible. I mean, it's why I, left my 15-year career in nonprofit management in Portland and decided to go and do this stuff after Trump was elected. So, I mean, it's super troubling. I think, some other elements that are against us in this, social media networks where so many people are getting their information. Look at what Elon Musk is doing with X, formerly Twitter, right? I mean,
I only call it Twitter. I won't.
Yeah, I know, I do too. Yeah. It's off the rails. I mean, it's just I'm still on there because it's still an important place where information, travels and where people learn about what's happening in the world. So we can't just abandon it. But it's, the number of right-wing trolls is just like quadrupled isn't big enough. It's just, it is really off the rails. And likewise, I mean, we know from, the Cambridge Analytica stories in 2016 and it's not like Meta is a great platform either, and so, TikTok is, China-owned company, can't really put all our eggs in that basket. So
right.
It's just, it's not like the social media companies are trying to help with this. There are things that could be done, and social media regulation, I think, is a really important policy agenda item that we need to dig into if we manage to get a trifecta in 2024 or 2026, along with pro-democracy bills like the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to shore up both the democracy side,
which no Republicans will vote for. None will vote for, because they know that the more people that vote, the fewer votes they're going to get. And even that message, to me, is a very simple one. And even that message doesn't seem to be widely known or shared enough.
Yeah. I mean, Wisconsin, you look at Wisconsin where, it's basically a 50-50 state. And the vote is pretty much 50-50. But the Wisconsin state legislature, I don't want to tell you what the percentages are, but it's like 69, percent Republican or something. It's way off balance because of the extreme gerrymandering. And you call them out on that, and Republicans are like, that's the game, and they just brush it off. And while people's votes are basically being stripped away from them, and the ability to impact, how their state runs is being stripped away from them by the gerrymandering. There's so many problems.
and isn't that part of the problem, though, that to them it is a game, right?
Yes.
So to Democrats, it's about communities and humanity and human rights and equal rights and voting rights and all of those things. And yet to Republicans, it's just a game. It's own the libs.
It's power.
It's power.
It's power.
Because the gerrymandering thing is something we really should talk about. And this is something that, I don't think we make enough of, is that one of the many methods that the Republicans and Trump have in their armory is gerrymandering, is boundary lines, is redrawing of districts. It's all of that stuff, which has been going on for years, but they've been ramping it up recently. And even though the Democrats have had a few wins recently with boundary lines, the gerrymandering is still very much stacked in Republicans' favor, which is why they would never want to do away with the Electoral College, right? A completely imperfect system of voting. In fact, it's the only way they can win, really, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Like, if you think about it, if you draw a district boundary such that it's like 53-47, those candidates are going to have to actually try and appeal to voters from the other side. They're going to have to moderate what they're saying, because there's some wiggle room. They could lose the election, right? But if you draw a district where it's, a plus 20, plus 25 district, you just have to make the district look like a duck or something to make that happen. Yeah. Then the representatives are effectively unaccountable, because it's such a hyper partisan atmosphere that they're not going to lose re-election, unless you're George Santos and you apparently commit felonies, on your way into Congress. Yeah.
Well, one by one, they might be able to get rid of Republican Congress people that way. But look how long it's taken to get George Santos removed. Right. This is the crazy thing. It's like it should have happened overnight. You don't need to go through all this process, because, the evidence was clear from the very beginning, even just in instinct. He's still lying as we speak right now.
Yeah,
denying.
He should have been forced to resign by Republican leadership right at the outset, as soon as everything became clear at the beginning. Because that didn't happen, I can understand, so they took a vote to expel him, I don't know, a month ago.
That's right.
And there were a number of Democrats who voted no. And part of I think, was it Jamie Raskin, I think maybe, who had a pretty reasonable explanation. It's like, look, slippery slope, guys.
Yeah.
If the House majority is such that they could just like decide that they don't like somebody and expel them, without there being, a formal process that's been completed or a criminal conviction, then it's just a really bad precedent to set, but potentially in a very, very likely, or potentially likely future scenario that Republicans have a, extreme majority in this country. So I think I get that. But so now that the House Ethics Committee has resolved that they think that he committed felonies on the way into office, I think that opens the door for expulsion. And I think all of the Democrats who voted no will vote yes now. So but
they need the vote, don't they? This is the problem with the House being so equally divided.
Yep.
Unlike the country, of course, the country is not equally divided, and yet the House is, which is proof positive,
right,
that we are not represented appropriately. And they needed George Santos's vote. Not that they passed any bills, for goodness sake, but they needed his vote because he's effectively the decider.
Yeah, and they know that if they lose that seat, it's gonna go to a Democrat.
Yeah.
So, and that's again, it comes down to power. The thing that they care about is power. They don't care about what's right. They don't care about democracy. They don't care about the fact that this guy is a fraud and defrauded, the constituents of his district.
Yeah.
They just care that they get his vote.
And not to mention his OnlyFans account, which he went on TV and lied about again the other day. Just kind of said, "Oh, I didn't even know what it was until someone in my office showed me." And it's like, well, your credit card statements say otherwise.
I think that was the case. MAGA Mike Johnson is the speaker now. That was probably his big mistake, because Mike Johnson and his son having the Covenant Eyes porn monitoring program going. Probably OnlyFans isn't going to go over well with leadership at this point.
I couldn't understand. Maybe you can explain it to me. And this is just an aside. When I watched him talking about that app, and his son has it and he has it, and they monitor each other, was he saying that they're allowed to have porn on their phones, but it can't be really bad porn because then it alerts them? Or was it no porn or no nothing on the phone? I couldn't work it out. It sounded to me like I'm allowed soft porn. I was like, what are you talking about, man?
Well, first of all, can we just say, like, your accountability partner is your son? Like,
number one, probably not a great place to start. Yeah. How
about like a buddy or, anyway, if you're going to go there.
Or your wife even.
Right. Yeah. That seems appropriate too.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Didn't make much sense to me.
I assume that it's like monitoring to make sure that the other person doesn't consume pornography, but maybe there's some allowances in there. I don't know.
Right. I was going to say, maybe they're allowed to watch Basic Instinct, and that's where it stops.
Right. That's where it stops.
Let's talk about MAGA Mike Johnson for a moment, because this is another shift in terms of, losing that separation of church and state, which is something that is obviously held very dear in the pro-democracy camp. And the founders very much made that point to separate. And yet Mike Johnson does not read it that way. In the same way that he interprets the Bible in his own way, he is interpreting the Constitution in a way. And I've heard him clearly outright say the founders did not choose to separate the church and state. They purposely wrote the Constitution with the religious requirements in mind. How do you feel about that?
I think it's extremely scary. It's one of the scariest pieces of the sort of Christian nationalist uprising in this country. The guy, the guy thinks that dinosaurs were on Noah's Ark. I mean, this is like, and I don't begrudge people. People can have whatever religious, ideas,
belief systems,
that's the whole thing about our side is like, we're just like, yeah, you do you, man.
Right.
But when it comes to governing, having religious principles as the guiding light for creation of public policy is extremely troubling and very, very against what the founding fathers wanted to see happen. They were, left, England. I'm not a historian. You had Heather Cox Richardson on last week, so I'm way out of my league here.
Neither of us should try to compete with.
I mean, that was the whole idea, was of a big part of the idea of founding America was to sort of get out from under the thumb of the Church of England. And that's why everything was framed in such a secular way in the Constitution. And these people just don't see it that way. And, from them to the Federalist Society, people that they're trying to identify for court appointments, who come from this super religious Christian background, it's troubling. And I see it in conversations that I have with just regular folks, particularly around the issue of abortion. Like, I really try and have like conversations with people from the other side of that issue. And they're just so like, it's a baby, from conception, it's a baby. And where do you get that from? Like, where that, I try and like meet them, like where, how do you come to sort of believe that? And it's, and 97% of the time it comes down to the church. And I try and sort of circle back to, okay, well, I'm not a religious person. I wasn't raised in a religious household. I'm a person who believes in morality for sure. But I just don't believe that. And so if you try and legislate that, over me, over my daughter, who's 13 years old, who doesn't believe that either, you're trying to impose your religion on other people. And that's not how this should work. And sometimes people's eyes just like get big and they like, oh, I never thought about it like that.
But isn't that interesting that no one has ever really questioned their beliefs? And, the first conversation I have, because I like to have these types of conversations just for fun. I'm an atheist, but I went to a Christian school. I studied the Bible. I did all the stuff. So I understand the kind of the teachings, but I recognize that this thing about interpretation is so fascinating to me, because in the same way that Mike Johnson is interpreting the Bible in his own way, and I saw a clip of him praying with someone on Zoom for the country, and then he starts crying during the prayer, like blubbing. And I mean, these people are so brainwashed into this kind of extremist version of Christianity. And I have no problem with any religion, moderate religion, that you are able to practice in your own way that does not affect other people. Of course, you do you, as you said. And yet this is now at another level where Christian nationalism and Christian extremism, it's this assumption that if you're not a Christian and if you don't have these same beliefs, that you are a lesser quality person and you don't deserve a place in American society. And that is very dangerous, isn't it?
It is. And the trick is that for the everyday people, who have been influenced to think that way, if you ask them, they'll say, no, I'm extremely tolerant. I think I want to live next door to people of different religions. I think everybody should be able to practice their religions, if they want to, but in practice, it doesn't translate, because they want to live in a world where their belief system is dominant. over everybody else. And so so it's a very sort of surreptitious job that the Christian nationalist movement has done to sort of overtake the political conversation and get people to think that way.
And it's baked into the Heritage Foundation's document of Project 2025, which people are starting to read now. I first got a PDF of this. It's nearly 1,000 pages long. And I downloaded it off their website. It was surprisingly easy to get this kind of manifesto for this extremist kind of Christian view of America.
Yeah.
And yet this is what Donald Trump has in store for the voters. It is a dictatorship with these extremist Christian values, where abortion will be codified into law to the point that no one will be able to access the healthcare that they need. It's very scary. I want to talk more about that with you in just a minute. We have to take another quick pause for our sponsor, and we'll be back here on The Weekend Show. Being on top of your mental health game is so important. As you know, I'm a journalist. In addition to all the work we do here, it's so easy to fall into bad habits or routines because life gets in the way, especially with your diet. Frankly, I think most people can relate that everyday life gets in the way, making it challenging to find a healthy snack without all that sugar and junk. If you're busy and constantly on the go like me, you need to try Mosh. It's a protein bar made for your brain. With 6 delicious flavors, each Mosh bar includes 12 grams of protein and is made with ingredients that support brain health, like ashwagandha, lion's mane, collagen, and omega-3s. At 160 calories and only 1 gram of sugar, Mosh protein bars are the guilt-free snack your brain and body will crave. Your brain is your number one tool, which is why Mosh protein bars are mindfully formulated by some of the top neuroscientists and functional nutritionists. Mosh now has a line of new plant-powered protein bars in 3 delicious flavors for those who want all the protein and brain support from the original bar, now made with plant-based ingredients. I have a Mosh bar every morning to kick off my day, and it's totally improved my performance. I love the taste, especially the peanut butter Mosh bar. It's delicious. Not to mention the packaging makes it super easy to take with me if I ever find myself hungry in between meetings. Don't settle for a mediocre snack when you can nourish your body and mind with the fuel it needs to succeed. So whether you're at the gym, on the go, or just living your best life, Mosh protein bars will keep your brain and body fit, fueled, and feeling good. Head to moshlife.com/weekend to save 20% off plus free shipping on your first 6-count trial pack. That's 20% off plus free shipping on your first 6-count trial pack, which includes all 6 mouth-watering flavors. moshlife.com/weekend. We're back with Nick Knudsen from Demcast here on The Weekend Show. I'm Anthony Davis. So we've mentioned Project 2025 a little bit. This is a document which I encourage people to look at and to read. And it's weird because, saying that, I'm almost like saying, hey, go out and read the Republican manifesto. And really, I should be saying, go out and read the Democrat manifesto. I should be promoting, but we take the kind of the Democrat version of events for granted because to me, it represents normality and peace and humanity and these words that we've talked about earlier. But the step change, that far right redirection of public policy, and, shutting down the judiciary and the FBI and rebuilding America in Donald Trump's image, that is the stuff that we could look forward to if we vote for a dictatorship in November.
Yeah, I don't think you'll hear him say, hey, vote for me for a dictatorship. But it's in the manifesto. Yeah. I mean, it really is. This document really, takes the veil off the agenda for the Republicans. Like you said, I think it was like up to 50,000 federal employees could be fired, and
they would have to take an allegiance test.
Yeah, they have to take an allegiance test. I mean, this, come on, guys, this sounds an awful lot like Nazi Germany, right? Allegiance tests and that kind of. I mean, and so replacing lifetime civil servants with Trump loyalists who aren't probably qualified to run the agencies that they're being put into.
Yeah.
Like you said, reformulating the Department of Justice and the FBI with yes men. That's weaponization of the federal government against the American people.
And I think we also need to stop saying it's a bit like Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
And go, it is basically Nazi Germany. And,
yeah.
and this is it, isn't it? It's that realization that America, which is such a strong nation, that is the kind of bastion of pro-democracy around the world that other nations look to, is actually falling. The democracy is failing and falling because of one solitary individual. And other countries like Turkey and Hungary and even Brazil under Bolsonaro,
yep.
they all took a leaf out of Trump's book. It was Trump's presidency that gave them license to redirect the politics of their own countries, because they're like, well, if America's doing it, then it's good enough for us. It made extremism mainstream.
Yeah. He is a very unique figure in history.
Yeah.
Because of his ability to connect with people despite being, completely full of shit, like all the time, like outwardly and wearing it, and sort of the almost religious fervor with which people follow him. They don't. People are at at least in the base. People are at the point where if he's convicted of crimes, they're going to say, that's proof of what Trump has been telling us all along. They're after him. They don't like him. They don't like that he's trying to defend our way of life. And so the deep state is coming for him. It's just they live in a completely different universe.
And he kind of predicts the conversation, which I find very interesting. Again, this is stuff that Joe Biden and the Democrats, they just don't do because they're so used to the status quo.
Right.
But because Trump is rewriting the narrative, I mean, there was this gag order that was put in place, which a lot of people were saying was unconstitutional. Barely an hour after this new order, which prohibited, the new order that effectively reversed the gag order.
Yeah.
He comes out and starts tearing into the clerk again and tearing into Judge Engoron.
Yeah.
But a lot of legal scholars were saying that the gag order was unconstitutional. And it doesn't help the argument that Democrats are for free speech.
Right.
When you have a Democrat judge imposing a gag order and fines upon a defendant. It's almost detrimental to the messaging, isn't it?
It's hard. It is. And this is the brilliance of Trump. Like, he wins either way in that situation. Like, he'll attack people. I have no doubt that, the judge and the clerk have been getting death threats and all kinds of terrible stuff coming at them because of, just because they're presiding over the, this process for the beloved Trump. But also because of what he says, I mean, this is a man who literally just said, I didn't win, or I won the election. It was stolen from me. Let's go to the Capitol. And people went to the people take cues from this man and go and do terrible things. Like, just look at January 6th.
Yeah.
And so like, I feel terrible for anybody, any civil servant, any judge who has to be anywhere in his proximity, because he is going to attack them. It seems like he's just going to get away with it until maybe there's like an actual like felony conviction at some point, and maybe that'll change things. But it's
or maybe not. I mean, this is my worry, is because he is getting special treatment by nature of his history and his celebrity, and
Yeah.
Again, the lack of seriousness. I think I complained about this on the Uncovered show that I do in the week. The lack of seriousness from the judge, and even Letitia James and Fawny Willis. They're just like, there's a lack of seriousness that, to me, kind of devalues the case in many ways, and Trump is kind of seizing on that. I just want to talk about something on a positive note, because there is some good stuff coming out the Dem camp, and that is this new Twitter account, the Biden-Harris HQ account, which is very interesting. They call it Just the Facts. It's Biden HQ is the handle. Just the Facts, Jack, a project of Biden-Harris 2024. We're on the other website too. So I think that's a reference to Threads. I'm just reading off of their title. And they are posting videos of either Trump screwing up or contradicting himself. They're posting videos and little clips of Republicans reviewing Republicans' job performance. And they posted a very interesting one with Chip Roy and a bunch of stuff. And this is the kind of action that I've been calling for a while, to actually see social media being used in the right way. Who's behind this? Do you know anything about it? Do you know where this has come from and why so late?
I mean, I think it comes out of the Biden camp. I can't claim to know exactly who's pressing the keys or whatever, but
yeah.
Why so late? Good question. I don't know. Better late than never. I think people saw what John Fetterman did last year in his campaign. He was extremely savvy with social media. He made Dr. Oz look like an absolute fool, 24/7 for 9 months leading up to that election. The man had a stroke and was not on the campaign trail, and basically just campaigned using, with his team using social media.
Yeah.
And was the victor. So I think probably people looked at that and said, okay, this is modern day campaigning. You have to sort of create an image for yourself as a little bit of we need a little bit more badass, a little bit more humor. I know the Biden Harris folks made a bunch of Dark Brandon signs with the laser eyes.
Yes.
And put a thousand of them around the venue where the Republican debate was last week. And then of course socialize that, because only a handful of people are actually going to see that, but unless you put it out on the socials. So it's smart. It's good. I love seeing it, more of that type of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that we try and do too, but it does mean something different when it's literally coming from like a Biden campaign account. So I'm glad that they're doing that.
Because there is a lot to celebrate as well. I mean, the United States economy is growing faster than the Chinese economy now. That hasn't been the case since 1980. China's economy has not really recovered from COVID or anything. And under Biden, with the rescue plan and the infrastructure bill, CHIPS and Science Act you mentioned, there's been 34 straight months of job growth, 22 months of unemployment under 4%. This is the best unemployment in 50 years.
Yep.
GDP, 4.9%. I mean, these things matter. And yet the problem is that if Biden announces them, they're never going to get onto the networks that people on the right are watching because of these information silos. So how does Biden cross the Rubicon into that kind of Republican ecosystem?
Well, I think one way is what we're doing, is having regular people who have social networks that bridge the gap between the camps. Particularly on Facebook, where connections are more based on personal relationship, family, people you went to school with, that kind of stuff, rather than sort of political affiliation, right? So there's some real opportunity there to have emissaries who are out there like sharing facts about what's going on. I think part of the problem with messaging all of the wins on the economy is that it's coming at a time obviously where there's been inflation, prices seem really high, but beyond that, we've been on this road for a while. It's really been since the Reagan administration, when Republicans basically decided to retilt the wealth of the nation toward the uber wealthy, and away from the middle class and the working class. And ever since then, housing's been getting more expensive. College has been getting more expensive. Goods and services have been getting more expensive. And, for me, like, I'm 43 years old. When I was a kid, my mom stayed home. My dad had a job. It wasn't like a CEO or anything. He had a good job and he provided for the family. We went on vacations. I can't even imagine being able to do that right now in this economy.
But this is the world over, and this is what people sometimes fail to realize, that it's the same in pretty much every country. Certainly in the UK, where I'm from, where inflation is through the roof, the cost of living is insane, and they've been living under a thing that conservatives call austerity for the last 15 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it just makes messaging difficult, because you can say, like, the economy's great. Look at GDP, look at low unemployment. But like, if I'm going to the grocery store and, like, vomiting after I leave because of how much I just paid, or I'm having to forego vacation so that I can, pay for my kid to go to daycare, it's just going to hit differently. So I think it's really important for Democrats. Yes, talk about the wins. We have to talk about the wins. The bringing manufacturing back, all the roads and bridges, all of these things. But we also have to talk about who's fighting for the American people. Frame the Democratic Party as the party of working people, of regular people, and frame the Republican Party as the party of the billionaire class and corporations. And with all the labor activity that's happening now, the rise in sort of angst on the worker side, there's a real opportunity to kind of hit that message home, because guess what? It's true. Like, it is actually, there is one party that actually takes people's everyday lives and their economic stability into account when crafting policy. And then there's another party that doesn't care about policy other than just giving tax cuts to the richest people in the world.
And yet, we've known this, as you say, since 1981, right? We've known this. And still people want to vote Republican because they think that they will handle the economy better. And then so much of it comes down to the economy. And yet Republicans have only increased to the national debt every time they've been in office and bankrupted the economics of it. And we know that Obama had to deal with that, as he did very well. But Biden's done it even better, reduced the deficit in a massive way.
Yep.
Trump added $7 trillion to the deficit. I mean, this is, these are hard facts, and yet they still don't seem to matter in that kind of cult-like environment where the supreme leader, the Führer, is the guy that is going to get the credit for everything and anything, whether he had anything to do with it or not.
Right. Yeah, it's not an easy problem to solve. It's decades in the making. Republicans have been considered the party of fiscal responsibility and whatnot for a very long time. And I think that of course it's going to take some time to sort of overtake that narrative. I think in a funny way, the lack of information rich content, the lack of the downslope of people sort of consuming just like kind of Walter Cronkite style news, and movement towards social media, it kind of opens up an opportunity for us to switch that narrative, because you're not dealing as much with the legacy media who's going to sort of continue to perpetuate those stereotypes about the parties, and it gives us an opportunity for more of a kind of a guerrilla attack in terms of information warfare to get the truth out there.
Yeah, hopefully. I do. I mean, 70% of people don't watch the news, but they are on Facebook and they are on Twitter and they do consume social media. And so, that's why I would like Biden and Kamala Harris to be appearing more in Insta Reels, then people could watch it while they're on the toilet.
Right.
This is the reality now.
That's
this
where
is
it's
how
happening.
people are. This is how people are consuming information. And so, and I hope that they are open to that. But again, part of the problem is the polarization, the divisiveness that, the moment you see Kamala Harris start talking, an upward flick of the thumb and she's gone. And so, it really does require a lot of skill in really creating and curating the messaging. Well,
and it's also where we can come in. And I hate to keep coming back to this because it's our shtick, but
no, but I mean, it's the reason you're here.
I think, yes, if somebody, a regular person in their social media feed sees Kamala Harris or Joe Biden's face and they're like, they're going to swipe up, like next reel, next TikTok.
It's like online dating, isn't it?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, thank you. But if a trusted messenger opens that clip and frames that clip for that audience member, whoa, did you see what Kamala Harris just said about student loans or whatever, and then you clip and then you go to the clip, it's more likely that they're actually going to listen to it and listen.
Or get the celebrities involved. I mean, that's the other thing. We live in such a culture, popular culture, that you really want to hear the actors and the entertainers that we are used to really kind of nailing their colors to the mast. I think I appreciate you don't want to do it too soon, because really the election cycle is most powerful in that quarter, that 3 months leading up to the vote.
Right.
So it would be interesting to kind of see how that plays out.
Yeah.
And whether, Trump is still a free man. I get into trouble on this channel. People write to me and they're like, why do you say that he's not going to get, arrested? Why do you say he's not going to go to jail? That is my view. I think he's too much of a slippery snake. Yeah. And, he always has an out. And unfortunately, it's often the kind of rich white people that can, use their privilege to get away from, the law or punishment or what,
completely,
the legals that everybody else is subjected to, which is 100%. A little frustrating.
I mean, just look at the gag order, right? I mean, he gets a gag order and he just gives the middle finger, doesn't really care about it. He's like, I'm not going to have consequences, so, and he's right. He's never faced consequences for anything other than losing the 2020 election.
Right.
I'm with you. I'll believe it when I see it. And I think it would be great to get a criminal conviction, but even if he gets convicted, will he, and is on the path to jail, will he actually go to jail before the 2024 election?
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, I'm not a legal expert, but my understanding is he'll probably appeal, and then there'll be a process. And
he'll go all the way to the Supreme Court, which he has waiting and ready for this. Exactly. This is part of the reason why he was desperate to pack the court in those last few weeks before he eventually left the White House, because he knew that there would probably be court cases against him, and it'll end up in the Supreme Court, and they'll vote in his favor.
Yeah.
And he has already rigged the system before these things get started. Yeah. I would finally say, I try not to do predictions. I'm not certainly going to ask you for one, but I personally think that the abortion subject is going to be the linchpin on the ballot, because ultimately, and this is something that I think the Democrats need to really push home, that if you are pro-life is amazing branding. It doesn't mean what it says, but they use that, and it plays on people's emotions. But anti-abortion really needs to be the phrase that is used, because it fights against that kind of pro-life movement. And if they truly were pro-life, they would have banned guns and assault rifles by now.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the election results from a couple of weeks ago, right? The Ohio passing a constitutional amendment to preserve the right to an abortion, the Virginia victories where the campaign was almost entirely centered around Youngkin's 15-week abortion ban.
Right.
I agree 100%. That's a really important one. There's 3 W's that I hope that the party embraces: women, the abortion issue, workers, can like keep on this sort of drumbeat about Union Joe.
Yes.
Joe out on the strike line, Joe having the backs of workers, Joe fighting against the corporate, the corporations who are price gouging us and trying to deny us the wages that we deserve. Like, I think that's a really winning argument, and it's a way to at least try and bring down our negatives on the economy before the 2024 election. And then the third W is weed. Look at Ohio. I mean, legalization is extremely popular in a very bipartisan way. Like, figure out ways, coming up to 2024 and I know that Biden moved to have marijuana be reclassified in the to a lesser controlled substance.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, at the federal level, but also like get as many ballot initiatives as you can, because that'll help to get the vote out with the young people, but not just the young people. It's a very broadly.
Everyone is smoking, Nick.
Everyone is
Good
smoking.
Lord.
I can't wait to get off this call. I got
Okay, listen. Well, I'll give you that opportunity now because we have to finish. But I'm really pleased that you had the time to meet with us. Nick Knudsen from Demcast, thanks for joining the Weekend Show.
So glad to be with you. Thank you.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News. The 5-Minute News OG daily podcast drops every morning. You can hear me telling you what's going on around the world while you make your coffee. And do join us next week with a brand new special guest and more factual news stories to discuss on the 5-Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.